Look. Another straight, white, lumpy-faced male talking about how he doesn't like the trailer of the new Ghostbusters remake. Oh, well, reboot or something or other, I don't know. They're kind of being really facetious about how they're approaching what to term this as, whether it's a reboot or a remake or a sequel or a fucking toaster oven, or I don't know, some shit like that. But yes, I know everyone is probably quite sick and tired at this point of hearing about this god-awful trailer for the new Ghostbusters film that's coming out later this year. But hear me out. I want to go into why I consider this film will be most likely bad, leading up to its review. Not as like people would say in that it seems to be over-relying on the premise of having an all-female cast, but rather on the fact of what it doesn't do similarly in a certain way to the original film, which by all large extents is a comedy classic, just based on purely on its trailer. And I know that's not an entirely fair way to assess this film, because to be fair, you can only really judge it after you've seen it. But judging from the three trailers I've seen, the first trailer released a few months ago, the cinematic one I saw when I went to see Captain America Civil War recently, and then the second one that's been released on YouTube recently, it doesn't really seem like there's that much of a uniqueness about this comedy film, aside from other comedy films of this day and age. It seems to just the first trailer, at least, seems to use the female cast as a prop up for the quality of the film, in that it relies on quite a lot of archetypal sort of female-centric comedy jokes that are quite prevalent in a lot of modern comedy films. And to be fair, that's not a bad thing. I don't think, women in comedy is a bad thing at all, really. I think it's a good thing that there are more women now in comedy, and that the female comedy scene is becoming more and more variated and more talented and fruitful. I think that's a great thing. But when that's the sole crux of your jokes, it tends to wear thin pretty fast, and I feel that's why a lot of people didn't really like the first trailer for this new Ghostbusters film. Now, the cinematic trailer, which I saw recently when I went to see Captain America Civil War, wasn't great. It was certainly better, but it wasn't great. It was just very ho-hum. It was very standard. It didn't do anything seriously wrong. It wasn't using some of the more gratuitously, how should we put this, unfunny or shit jokes from the first trailer, but it wasn't great. But it was still a bit of an improvement, so I was thinking, alright, well, I haven't seen the second trailer. Maybe when I have a look at it, I might, have my faith restored in this up-and-coming film. I might see it as something of a promising prospect, so to speak. But I watched it, and I came crashing back down to earth again, because whereas the first trailer relied somewhat a bit too heavily on the gimmick of having an all-female lead cast, the two succeeding trailers, rather, didn't really concentrate on this too much, but the third trailer absolutely nosedived for me into, in terms of raising up my hopes and joy for this upcoming film, because none of the jokes made me laugh. None of the jokes really seemed to stick, not just on a personal, individual basis, but as, commonly perceived adjectives of comedy. None of the jokes in the third trailer really seem to stick all that much. In fact, barely in any of the trailers have, if I'm perfectly honest. And I don't want to be mean, but it's not really encouraging, to be honest, when I see that. And this sort of second sort of internet trailer really quite irritated me, because it revealed, or sort of at least partially revealed, a major plot twist about one of the main 5 or so characters, in a way that I felt was somewhat haphazardly trying to build up a bit of hype, a bit of, juiciness, a bit of salivation for this up-and-coming film, and I feel like I can understand why they did it, but if you watch the trailer, you may understand what I'm getting at here. But I personally think it was a terrible decision. I don't think you should ever reveal anything substantial about a film in its trailer, and I stand by that firmly. And they did it in this, most recent trailer, and it really just made me think they are just trying to pull out all possible stops to, in terms of trying to get people hyped up for this film, and they're doing it in such a sort of ham-handed, sort of haphazard way that I don't really feel like they're putting that much effort into, or really that much consideration into the residual sort of quality of the actual trailer itself, to make just a solid, direct trailer that doesn't reveal too much about the film at all. Maybe has a few jokes here and there, maybe an introduction to the characters, that's it. And each of the trailers has kind of tended to stray away from that. The first two trailers, of course, didn't do that so much. This third one definitely did. But I'm gonna sort of just judging on these trailers, I'm gonna say why I don't really feel that enthused for this film at this point in time, based not on the premise that the full, main lead cast is populated by women. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't have any problem with women being in comedy. All I care about is if I enjoy their comedy. Really, it's pretty standard thing to believe, I think. But I've got to say, even though comedy is very subjective, none of the jokes in any of these trailers have really made me laugh. I do like the special effects in them. They're a bit hokey in some places, but I still stand by them that they're pretty damn sweet. And the set designs, costume designs, and gadgetry designs are marvellous. Absolutely superb. I think, at the very least, this is going to be a wonderful looking film. Beautifully looking. And, probably going to have some very, nice and decent cinematography. I think maybe a good bit of direction here and there. But editing, judged on the basis of the trailers, definitely not so much, because it either reveals too much about the plot, or I just don't really feel like I can get that much into laughing at these or laughing with these characters, because the jokes just aren't integrated that well into the trailers, and they fall quite flat for me personally. And then there's these three core aspects, I feel, that differentiate this from the original 1984 Ghostbusters, that really makes me just not feel that enthused for this new Ghostbusters remake. And the first is that, the directors, first of all, are always going to be a big part of whatever film or TV you might be watching. And the director for the new Ghostbusters film, let's see, what's his name? Paul Feig. He's directed films since 1986. Let me make this clear. He's not illegitimized in any way. He's clearly a hard-working man who's been working for a very long time. He's been working on multiple TV series. But the one problem I have with him is the fact that a lot of his comedy seems to be skewed towards a very sort of commonly perceived type of comedy that isn't really tailored to sort of say a genre sort of film like Ghostbusters was, because while at the end of it was generally quite a straightforward comedy, it was also encompassed in this sense of being a sci-fi film with a lot of sort of somewhat occult sort of themes to it as well. And this guy hasn't really done anything like that. Now, the director of the 1984 original, Ivan Reitman, he was a bit more different, but at the same time, he was working for far longer, and he's still working today, let me make this clear. In fact, currently, he's still working on a untitled Ghostbusters project, Triplets, the new Ghostbusters film, which gives me some hope that he'll probably be an influencing producer on it, and the upcoming Baywatch film. But he has worked on multiple films before Ghostbusters with, occultish sort of themes, or sci-fi themes like Space Hunter, Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, or Blackout, Isla, the Tigress of Siberia. These films that, by and large might be not considered the greatest, but they do have these themes of sci-fi or, the occult written into them. And whether or not he's been the producer or director on these films, he does have experience in this genre, and I don't really get that feeling from the director of the new Ghostbusters film. And another thing that really made me quite like the original Ghostbusters, and I'm not a big Ghostbusters fan, to be honest, I did really like the original film, but Ivan Reitman was just the right sort of kind of guy to meld together the clashes of the main cast of Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Sigourney Weaver, Harold Ramis, Mick Moranis, Ernie Hudson, and William Arthur. He had that sort of special connection with them that really allowed them to sort of gel together and create this quite unique sort of sense of comedy. And this was something you can really tell is quite prevalent with the main four leads themselves: Ernie Hudson, Harold Ramis, Dan Aykroyd, and Bill Murray. They all have this sort of weird sense of chemistry, along with Harold Ramis's writing, that really creates for this sort of weird mish of quite unique comedy that you only get to really see between certain casts 2, 3, possibly 4 times a decade. And for the 80s, the main four leads of Ghostbusters 1 was one of these unique little flourishes, and they did a really good job. You can tell they really got along well. They had this special sort of spark, and the way they sort of worked together really produced something that was quite unique in terms of comedy. I mean, of course, comedy relies quite heavily on its writing, and the writing for this film is reasonably straightforward, but the way the men interact, the way they deliver their lines in accordance with each other's own deliveries and performances is quite a sort of, I don't really know how to explain it without becoming too philosophical and flowery, so I'm just going to say it was quite special, and you really only get that kind of connection in a comedy film very rarely, Anchorman 1 for the 2000s, a very uniquely comedic film in that sort of day and age, and lo and behold, when they made a sequel to that, it was nowhere near as good, because they just weren't able to connect that really unique spark that the first film had. With the new film, I don't really get that feeling from the trailers that they have this, they have this sense of magic sort of bonding together that the original film did. I won't, of course, know for definite until I actually see the film, but the comedy seems quite superfluous to the degree that I would say that it's going to rely more so on the writing rather than the delivery and acting of the main female leads. And as far as I'm concerned, the comedy in a film is only so good as the delivery it's given, and it really matters that you have a good delivery and chemistry on set of a comedy film in order to deliver the proper punch of these jokes. And I just don't get that from this new film, particularly from the trailers. I mean, of course, that's all I've seen so far, but I just don't get that special spark. But the one sort of thing that I feel a lot of people haven't really drawn attention to, that I really feel kind of sinks the trailers for the new Ghostbusters film, is easily the lack of a proper anchor to the comedic sort of flourishes and craziness of the group. All of the main four leads in the new Ghostbusters film seem to all be some different variation on slightly mad. And, you know, you've got the sort of technological, sort of hard-ass, badass chick who's slightly kooky. You've got the scientist, sort of physician woman, my mistake, who just seems a bit awkward, a bit weird. You've got Melissa McCarthy, who I was hoping would produce some, you know, some more tough-nosed comedy like she did in Spy, but just seems to be falling back on the sort of big lady fell down boom sort of kind of comedy that we saw in Tammy. And then Leslie Jones, I don't even know what her character is supposed to be, but she just seems to be this loud, obnoxious character who has no calm to her. And the thing is, one thing that I feel that really made the original film quite sort of unique and quite enjoyable to watch was that, you know, as much as a bunch of absolute weirdos, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis are in this film, you know, as weird as Peter Venkman, Raymond Santz and Egan Spengler were in this film, and they were odd people, what really, you know, gelled the comedy together, I feel, in the original film was the presence of Ernie Hudson's Winston Zeddemore, who was like the sort of, he was cool, he was suave, he had a bit of style, a bit of pizzazz to him, but by and large he was, you know, reasonably down to earth. He was just doing this job because he needed the money and because he was quite a tough bloke, and he was kind of like the anchor of the characters in the group. He was the anchor for the comedy and acted essentially as the straight man to the absolute balminess of Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, and the weird adventures they'd get up into in this film, and in the sequel, to be fair, actually, which came out 5 years later. And again, I don't really get that from the 2016 remake. I just get the feeling that they're all different variations on Mad and different variations on shouting or some sort of obnoxious comedy. Again, comedy is entirely subjective, so some people will find this funny, and I cannot deny their tastes because it's their tastes, it's their opinion. Comedy is highly subjective and is probably the most subjective form of entertainment in the world. But just speaking from my perspective and how commonly perceived the two Ghostbusters films from the 80s were, and what it takes to make a truly engaging trailer, and what I would say it takes to make a commonly engaging and entertaining, you know, sci-fi comedy film, you know, trying to speak as objectively as possible, and, you know, trying to speak either subjectively as possible or subjectively towards my own tastes, I can't really say either way that this fills me with a lot of hope or laughs, the trailers for this new film, and I feel like that's going to be resembled a lot in the actual film itself. Whether that actually becomes the case, again, I don't know. I'm going to have to watch the film itself when it comes out to see if I'm proven right or wrong, but based on the evidence, does seem a bit more like the no category of it being funny and unique is going to be more likely, which is you know, kind of disappointing. Like I said, I'm not too invested in this franchise, but the first film was such a big hit and such an iconic film in comedy, even to this day, that I would arguably say you could never properly give it a proper remake or reboot or even sequel. I mean, the second film, released in 1989, wasn't bad, but it was nowhere near as good as the first one. And I feel when you've got a film as magnanimous and impactful and big as Ghostbusters 1, RoboCop 1, you know, the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, you know, The Lion King, such magnanimous films that had such an impact on their genre in film that you can't really replicate it again. I don't really see any major point in, you know, following them up. I mean, of course, in hindsight, immediately after the film's release, it's quite hard to judge that, but we're at least able to tell, like, 2 or 3 years or so at least afterwards the release of this said film, and you can tell for each of those films I just mentioned, any releases after them for the same conclusive franchise just did not work. I mean, okay, Timon and Pumbaa series on television was quite a good follow-up to the Lion King, the Lion King film, but every other film released after it was just nope. Ghostbusters 2, not the worst sequel ever, but certainly nowhere near as good as Ghostbusters 1. RoboCop 2 and 3, all of the cartoons, all of the live-action series, and especially the 2014 remake of RoboCop, all awful, and a terrible follow-up to one of the greatest films of the 80s. I mean, I can understand rebooting and remaking films from a certain series when it's become kind of dormant and the last couple of films weren't that good, like they did with Batman, or, you know, like they did with, or, you know, like they tried to do with Hitman. And we're okay, the new Hitman film was not good at all, but they saw the first one didn't do too well, and so, you know, you would logically think, well, you know what, it's a hot property, it didn't do too well though when we translated it to film, so let's have a go a few years later, let's just let things simmer down. And that's what they tried with Hitman, and yeah, it didn't work, but you can at least respect their patience in having another crack at it. This, I feel, is... This Ghostbusters film, though, has been left so long and is being remade from a film that is so iconic and so well regarded that I just don't think there's any way that you could possibly make it anywhere near as good or as impactful or as memorable or as objectively funny as the first one, and I really, really worry about that. And not just that, but for the future other potential remakes and sequels. I hope this trend doesn't continue, but it's a possibility, and I really, really am worried about it. So hopefully it'll be a good film. Hopefully I'll be proven wrong. Hopefully these 4 ladies will do an amazing job, but I'm going to be optimistically sceptical. But even then, that is really pushing it at this point. I don't know. I'm trying my best here. I'm really trying my best to put on my hopes for it, but it's not easy. It really isn't. So, I don't know. I mean, you guys tell me what you think, if you are looking forward to this film or not, or if you think you can never remake a film as impactful and as big as the original 1984 Ghostbusters. But as always, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video as much as I've had making it, researching it, all that good stuff. And, you know, sorry that the last video, by the way, was a bit rambly and a bit shit, to be honest, but it was one of those things where I just had to get it off my chest. And same thing with this as well, I feel. So, as always, I hope you guys have found this video entertaining, enlightening, and, you know, just good to sort of watch, really, just generally. But, yeah, stay tuned. And if you would like, maybe, I don't know, check out my Twitter and my gaming channel and my blog in the video description below. And until next time, stay safe, have fun with fucking whatever, and stay tuned, and I'll see you guys next time. Oh my